In lesson 29.1, day 1, we're going to be talking about rational expressions and how to simplify them and state excluded values. So we're using the note sheet that I posted in Google Classroom to go along with this lesson. Need something to write with? You might need a calculator to help you with some of your factoring. But let's go ahead and skip down here, okay? So to simplify a rational expression, you're going to have a polynomial on top and a polynomial on the bottom of a fraction here. So all of this involves is a lot of factoring. You're going to factor every expression you have. So you factor the numerator and the denominator. Once you have your denominator factored, though, this is where you're going to get those things called excluded values. Okay, the excluded values, okay, are the variables that must be restricted so the denominator will not be 0. So we like to do this when it's in our factored form because it makes it easy to solve for x. So in this particular problem, if x is -2 or +2, it would give you a 0 in a denominator. And we know if we do anything in a calculator, if you try to divide by 0, you're going to get an error message because you can't do it. You're not supposed to divide by 0. So that's what it means to be an excluded value. So we always do this once it's factored. Look at your denominator. Any value that would give you a 0 in the denominator, we would call our restricted, okay, or excluded values. But after that, we kind of listed our restricted values. You factor everything, and anything that they have in common, you cross out. They're going to divide out from each other. So to simplify, this means to kind of factor it and cancel out any common factors. Okay, so I just have a couple of examples down here that I'm going to go through. So I'll do a couple and I'll let you try a couple as well. Now in A, we have x squared plus 20x plus 36. So on top here, I have a trinomial. So I'm going to factor that trinomial. Okay, meaning we need factors of positive 36 that add to 20. So thinking about what factors work, we have 36, we have 9 and 4, but that won't work. We have 6 and 6 would be 12, so that doesn't work. It looks like 18 and 2 are going to work for this one. Not a common factor duo that we're used to, but that's okay. So on the top then, this is going to factor as x plus 18 and x plus 2. So my top part is factored completely. Okay, now on the bottom, we have x cubed minus 4x. So they have a common factor there of an x. If I take that out, it leaves me with x squared minus 4, which we know that is a difference of squares. So on the bottom here, we have an x in front. We have an x plus 2 and an x minus 2. Because a difference of squares, remember you take the square root of that 4. One factor is a plus, one factor is a minus. Okay, before I cancel anything out, though, I want to get my restricted values or my excluded values. So what x cannot equal. So look at each factor in the denominator. So if this one, x can't be 0. X can't be -2. And x can't be +2. Because if it's any of those three values, you're going to get a 0 in your denominator, which is what we do not want. Okay, now comes the simplifying part. So once I have my restricted values, I go back to my factored expression, and anything that's in common, we can cross out on top and bottom. So you're crossing out entire factors. So you can't just cross out like an x and an x. It has to be the entire expression. So those x plus 2's cancel. So that's really the only thing they have in common. So we have x plus 18 left on top. Okay. We have an x times an x minus 2 left on bottom. And that's all. So that is your simplified expression. And again, you're canceling out whole expressions. So you can't cancel out like the 2 and the 18 because you'd have to be able to cancel out everything in that term. Okay, so you can only cancel out whole factors. Okay, I'm going to go through actually C because I think B will be a little easier for you guys to try. But let me go through C and see if we can get that So on C, we have x cubed minus 9x. So again, they have a common factor of an x, so I'm going to take that out. So leave me with x squared minus 9. Now on the bottom, x minus 3, there's nothing to factor there. So it's just going to stay x minus 3. So let's see, I could still factor the top. We have a difference of squares. So x plus 3, x minus 3 is how that factors. And again, on the bottom, that x minus 3 couldn't factor at all, so there's nothing to do with that. Okay, so before we cancel anything out, let's get our restricted values. And again, we look at the denominator for that. What values of x would make our denominator 0? Well, it would just be 3. 3 minus 3 is 0. And that's your only factor down there. So you only have one restricted value. Okay, so now the fun part is where we can cross off stuff. Okay, so these x minus 3s will cancel each other like this. So the only thing left in my expression is x times x plus 3. So that is your simplified rational expression. And we don't ever really multiply anything back together. We kind of leave it in our factored form. But that's it for that. Okay, so I'm going to have you guys try B. Okay, let's start by factoring the numerator. We have 6x plus 60. So factor that numerator and see what you get. Okay, if you factor the numerator correctly, you should have that we have x we could take out, and it's going to leave you with x plus 10. Okay. Now, when we factor our denominator, we have a trinomial there, so I want you to factor that trinomial. Factors of negative 70 that add to 3. See what works. Get your factors. Okay, if you factored it correctly, you should have gotten that 10 and negative 7 would work. So your factors are x plus 10 and x minus 7. So now from there, simplify this expression and tell me what you get. Okay, your x plus 10 should cancel out, so that should leave you with 6 over x minus 7 for your simplified expression. Now, I was bad and forgot to do the excluded values before I canceled stuff out, so just look at it's negative 10 or 7 would give you a 0 in the denominator, so those are your excluded values. So that is how you simplify expressions. You just have to factor everything, factor the numerator, factor the denominator, and cancel out any common factors that they have on both top and bottom.